So hello, everyone. Welcome to our professional development session on teaching as research. We're very excited and happy to have you here with us today for this workshop to do some analysis of your own teaching and prioritizing somewhat of your own personal development as teachers and leaders. I know the last professional development session we have was very much focused on students and early childhood and being leaders for young learners. And this one will be focused a lot on yourself, but I'll also let our speaker introduce the theme of the workshop as well. So we are very excited to have Miss Oluwatoyin here today with us doing a workshop. She's a very special guest. We met at the Transformative Education Summit because she's doing some incredible things in the area of being a social entrepreneur, an NGO leader, also as a researcher and academic. So she's a lecturer at the University of Ibadan and also a PhD student in STEM education at Tufts University. She has also created strategies and institutional roadmaps for nonprofits, designed programs, projects, and she also leads the One Foundation, which provides entrepreneurial education, mentoring, and funding linkages to over 1,800 entrepreneurs in Nigeria. So we are very excited to have her here leading this workshop for us. So like usual, we'll have give it the stage over to her and then have a question and answer at the end. So without further ado, I will hand it over right now. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Please confirm if you can. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. My name is Oluwatoyin Ajilore. I am a Nigerian, but I currently live in the United States. And like Amanda already said about me, I think I should just share my screen immediately. Okay, please confirm if you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's do a slideshow then. Yeah. So today's we're going to be talking about teaching as research in two contexts, but we'll get into that. I think I should properly introduce myself. My name is Oluwatoyin. I work across four major areas. I work across education, research, social impact, and entrepreneurial development. And my work in education I feel like my work in education is like the one that undergirds every other thing, because one way or the other, even in the other aspects, I still focus a lot on trainings, on educating people, not necessarily the formal education that we do in schools, but still education. And so I think of education as like the denominator of everything I do. But in terms of focal points, I'm a lecturer at the University of Ibadan. I teach in the Department of Geology, although I'm currently on the study visa. All right, I think that's been corrected. Thank you for that. So I used to teach undergraduate students, mostly second and third year students in the Department of Geology, although I've also taught students from various faculties, including the Faculty of Law, because there's a particular course that they do in sciences that involves me. And I'm also a researcher in the sense that I'm currently actually running my PhD research in STEM education at Tufts University in the United States. And more importantly, I've been doing a number of research work in the past. I have about 7 published works, including conference papers, book, chapter in book, and stuff like that. I work in the social impact sector in the sense that I run a non-profit in Nigeria, like Amanda was saying, that works with entrepreneurs. We provide them entrepreneurial education, mentorship, and a bit of advocacy for small businesses in Nigeria, which is also the part of entrepreneurial development. So the first thing I need to talk about is why we are having this conversation today. This particular topic is really dear to my heart, especially because education is dear to my heart. I believe that education is the supply chain of human development. That's where I like to think of it. I think of it as it is what undergirds regards every other form of human development. It is when people are able to use their minds. It is when people are groomed to be able to leverage the power of their thinking that they are able to make any other progress in their lives. And if they make progress in their life, they're also able to make progress in the world. So this, and because teachers are the forefront of education, I think of them as the education frontliners. This topic is really important to me. And for so many reasons, but I'm just going to talk about 4. And I'm giving this context so you would understand why this is to be taken seriously. I believe that, understanding why helps you to really take in the knowledge that you need. First is the realization that education can no longer be business as usual. I'm sure you already know that. And honestly, I must commend everyone who is in this program, in this community. For me, it shows that you are really interested in doing education the right way. Going this extra mile to professionally develop yourself as an educator in whatever space that you have. It's something that should be applauded. And I'm sure that part of the reason why you're also doing that is because you have come to the realization that education can no longer be business as usual. We have done a lot of rote memorization. We've made school into this thing that people are trying to run away from. In Nigeria, there's something that people say, they say school has come. How do I interpret that now? Something like school is not worth it, something like that. And I'm sure that you can see a rising disengagement from the whole idea of formal education and people feeling as if it's worthless, it's useless. It just comes to let us know that we need to do education differently, because the truth is it's useful, but because of the way it's been done over the years, it seems to be losing its value in the eyes of many people. That's first. Second is the fact that education is human-centered. I know that is supposed to go without the saying. That is supposed to be something that is obvious to all, but I realize it's something that we need to actually think about. There's a way that education can be done in a way that it is about the action of what the knowledge in terms of facts that are being taught, and not necessarily about the people who are being taught. And I personally believe that is such a wrong way to view education. I believe that education is supposed to be about the people who are involved in the process and how they are interacting with the knowledge that's been taught. The knowledge is not supposed to be the biggest thing, because that thing we are calling knowledge came from human interaction, it's human creation. I'll come into all of that. Third is the fact that real life data is key. And I'm always very glad to talk to teachers, because like I said earlier, I already believe that teachers are the frontliners of education. They are the ones who are dealing directly with it. And for such a long time, I feel like teachers have been given the back seat when it comes to solving education problems. So there's this way where the teaching profession and the teachers themselves are sometimes thought of as tools in the education, not necessarily as part of the people who design education. I hope you understand what I mean. So there's this way that, people talk about how we need to solve education problems, and they talk about all of these things outside the teacher's perspective, trying to come up with solutions for the teacher to implement without necessarily involving the teacher, because they just think of teachers as another tool. Just like a textbook is a tool in education, there's a way that people have looked at teachers as if they are just another tool that we use to get towards the kind of education we want, not realizing that teachers themselves are like the frontliners of the education. They are the ones who have direct access to the real life data of the reality of what education is, what education needs, and how education can move forward. And I feel that it is the responsibility of us teachers, include, because I myself am a teacher, we need to reorient the word to see the teaching profession in a different light. We need to reorient the word to see us as solution providers, not people who need to be provided solutions for implementation, but we ourselves can be solution providers ourselves for the education sector. And that's what I was trying to say here, that real life data is key, because we interact directly with real life data. We are the ones right in front of it. You are the one that see what is happening with the students. You are the one that see how the students are faring in class. You are the one that see what the students are using the knowledge to do. You are the one that see if it is working or not. The fourth thing is what I call the constraints on formal academic research for teachers. After I started my PhD, I really started thinking, like, it dawned on me that, honestly, not every teacher will be able to do a PhD in education. And that's just the truth. It's not realistic. But at the same time, everybody needs to understand how to approach education from that standpoint of how do we know the problems? How do we know the problems in a way that we're not just assuming, but we actually are able to know it from a research perspective? How do we address the issues? How do we test solutions and all of that? And so if I combine the reality that we just imagine if everybody, it's just not realistic that everybody who is teaching has to have a PhD. It's not realistic. Yet we need solutions in education. And I already mentioned earlier that teachers are frontliners. So if the teachers who are frontliners might have constraints, and the constraints usually involve resources, time. It's not even just resources is one of them. In fact, that not everybody can afford to do that. Second is even time. Some people can afford to do that in terms of finances, but they don't have the time. PhD involves 3, 4, 5 years of your life. So how do we still get the teachers who are supposed to be frontliners and problem solvers in the education sector to still be able to solve the problems they are handling without necessarily the formal academic research, that kind of deep certification, doing PhD and postdoc? How do we still get them to do teaching, be able to evaluate, be able to provide solutions without going through all of those formal training in that sense? That's why we're having the discussion. Particularly what this discussion is supposed to address is how do we assess education? How do we position ourselves as teachers in the sense that as teachers who are also problem solvers in education, who are able to understand the problems, who are able to address the problems and try to bring up solutions, and who are able to test if the solution is working, see what is not working, try to, go in reiteration. I don't know how many of us know a little bit about design thinking. I hope there are people who know about what I'm talking about. But the process of design thinking involves all of these issues of tests. You ask your question, you empathize, you test, you ideate, and all of that. So the idea is, how do you do that as a teacher in your class without necessarily doing it as research? You understand? Just the way I am going to be doing a PhD. How do you do that every day in your class? How do you ensure that your every interaction with your students doesn't just end with teaching them what you need to teach them and going, but one interaction can help you see how to do the next better. One interaction can show you a little bit more give you a little bit more understanding of what the problem is. One interaction might help you sort of assess another style of teaching and see if it's work compared to another one. How do you position yourself that way? That's literally what we're talking about today. Please let me know if you're understanding me. I would like to see the chat. I'm a very conversational person. So I want to be sure that I have people following me. Okay, I'm seeing chat, but for some reason I cannot see them, which is really weird. Amanda, do you know why? I'm seeing numbers, but for some reason I can't see the chat. I'm clicking it, but it's not working.
I will try to figure that out for you.
Right.
But people are saying we know about design thinking, the 5I model. Yes, they're following along with you for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so that's literally what we want to talk about today. And I just want to take this as a conversation between a teacher and another teacher. I'm not coming at you as a researcher in that sense, because I know that there can be this way where the education researcher, in terms of the formal education researcher, and the teachers are in two different planes, where education researchers are just saying things are supposed to be done this way, but teachers are saying, no, it doesn't work in my context. No, you don't know what is happening in my village. You are making all of these assumptions because you don't know that in my school there's no light. I can't present. I can't show them images. There's nothing like that. So I'm not coming at you as an education researcher in that sense. I'm coming at you from the perspective of someone who has been a teacher. I have taught, like I said, I mentioned I've taught university. Even before that, I've volunteered to teach high school students in the past. So I have a bit of understanding of some of these challenges. And I'm also speaking as someone who is not just a teacher, but a teacher from a developing world, where the where the situation becomes a little bit more complicated, if you ask me. I'm sure that you know that the solution becomes not a little, actually, a lot more complicated. There were so many bright ideas I had when I wanted to start my work in the university, that when I got into the system, I realized, how am I going to do this with all of these challenges? How was I going to, I imagined, ensuring that my students don't interact with just text, ensuring that we interact with videos, images, and all of that. But I'm in a class of 1,000 students, for example. How am I supposed to do that when there's no electricity? So these are it is from this context that I'm having this conversation with you, because I'm also aware that many of us are from Africa, Asia, and maybe a number of developing countries. So let's get right into it. I'm going to set a context. Teaching as I want us to think of teaching as research from two interdependent ways, but they are not exactly the same. They are interdependent, quite all right. They lead to each other, but I want us to think about them separately a little so that it can be of help. First is the teaching and learning process itself, styled as research. Second is teaching as research education. Now, let me explain what I mean. For the first one, where I meant the teaching and learning process styled as research, I mean you being in class and the process of teaching and learning, the interaction between teaching and learning itself is tied as if you and your students are researchers together. Does that make sense? So you are addressing your teaching interaction not from a perspective of telling people things that they should know, not from a perspective of giving them information, not from a perspective of just getting them to acquire what you think is the knowledge they need to know about a certain thing, but more of positioning the teaching and learning process as a way where yourself and your student together are like explorers, are like researchers trying to find out the truth. That's the first context. The second context is about teaching as education research. That is more about you, not necessarily about your student now, not necessarily about you and your student. This is more about you. This is more about your profession. You as a teaching professional, poised as somebody who is trying to research solutions in education. So I already mentioned that they are similar, they are interdependent, but as I go along, I believe that you understand the difference. So I would like to ask a question. My teaching mode is always in, even when I'm presenting, it happens like that. So I would like to ask, I've been talking about research. What do we even think is research? And since I am not able to, I don't know why I'm still not able to see the chat. I am thinking it might be because I'm presenting. So I'm wondering, should I end and see if I'm able to see the chat now? I'm still not able to see it.
Yeah, I think if you stop sharing your screen, I think that's probably why you can't see the chat.
Oh, now I can see it. Thank you. All right. So I'm getting some of the answers. Okay, this works. Thank you so much, Amanda. Okay, Shanaz, I'm so sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. Please, apologies. Shanaz says you are initiating a study, a research. We do it student-led conferences, project-based learning, where students lead the study. Awesome, thank you. So I was asking question, what research is? That's my question, and I can see Milton saying, asking the right question and looking for solutions. Do we have any other person that wants to share what they think research is? What does research mean to you? You could use the chat box, please. I guess that's like the easiest way. Isaac says research basically is learning through curiosity. I love that definition. Priya says initiating a systematic inquiry, collecting and analyzing data, evaluating data, and taking a stance. That's such a comprehensive definition. Thank you so much, Priya. Jennifer says researcher is finding a particular case in details. Thank you, Jennifer. Elizabeth says looking for more information. Afrin says making students to get their thinking caps on. Thank you. That's exciting. Explore and investigate. Cripso says to find out more about a problem. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful definitions. So Cynthia says exploring the unknown. I think one thing that's been common to a number of these things is explore, looking for something, because it's the same thing as inquiry. Somebody says curiosity, asking. That's some of the things that has asking open-ended questions. So there's been asking, there's been exploring, there's been inquiry, something that just shows that we're looking for something. We're not assuming we already found it. We are taking a position of someone who don't necessarily have it yet, but is able to get it. Those two things are very important. Who don't exactly necessarily have it yet, but have the capacity to be able to get it. Ngom says, trying to find answers to tendencies and abnormalities. Thank you so much, guys. I think I should share my screen again. Just a minute, please. Study to increase knowledge and solve problems. That is amazing, guys. Thank you so much. All right, so let me continue to share. Awesome. So going back to the context, so we're going to take it like one after the other. I hope everyone can still see me. For some reason, I can't see anyone again. Why is that? Oh, awesome. Send. Thank you. All right. So I am going to, I'm just trying to reiterate. I'm trying to reiterate what I already mentioned in terms of the context. The context is teaching and learning process as styled as research. That's yourself and your students. The process we are calling learning, styled as if we are trying to use some of your definition, explore, ask questions and stuff like that. And the second is about you as a professional, poising your professional stance towards being not just teaching, but making your teaching seem as if it's education research. Trying to, understand that education is done, how it should be done better, what are the problems, what are the solutions and stuff like that. So let's go into it. Let's talk first about teaching learning process styled as research. I am going to be quoting two people. The person on the right is one person who, she's on my left. I hope she's on your left, so I'm not sure. The person on the left with the image, her name is Professor Eleanor Duckworth. She's a professor. She's actually an emeritus professor of education in the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and she's such a wonderful inspiration for me. She's like a mentor. I've had opportunity to meet her, and hopefully I'm even going to meet her again. And I think I've been influenced a lot by her work. Her work gave word to some of the things that had been bubbling in my heart before I started my PhD. Because I've been thought for some time. I started asking myself, this is not working. There has to be a better way to do this. So she said, this is a quote. She said, getting people to think about what they think and asking them questions about it is the best way I know how to teach. Let me read that again. She says, getting people to think about what they think, thinking about what they think, not just think, but think about what they think, and asking them questions about it is the best way I know how to teach. Let me speak a little bit about that. There's a way, I'm sure you probably saw this, you experienced this. I don't know how you teach, but when I was a student in terms of, from K-12 education, I felt like most of the time, maybe not all, a few teachers were wonderful. But a lot of the time, I felt like, to me, education was just about knowledge acquisition. You come to class, we want to deal with a topic, and then the teacher comes and says all that they need to say. And, I felt like my goal as a learner was to acquire the information, to take it in, listen in class, write down the notes, read it back, know the definitions, know the examples. Yes, it doesn't mean I wasn't thinking. I actually was. You have to agree with me. Even that, in doing that, you have to think. In fact, to cram things, you have to think a little. So the problem was not that I was not thinking. The problem was that I was not thinking about what I was thinking about. Over the years, I have come to see and I've come to agree that the goal of education, I personally believe that the goal of education should be about getting people to think and to think about what they are thinking about. As much as, what we call growing professionalism is about maybe knowing more about the field, I really believe that in itself is more of a byproduct of something else, a byproduct of the ability to think. So what I'm talking about here in terms of styling your teaching and learning process as research is encouraging this system of education with your students in a way where they are exploratory. They are able to believe that they have the capacity to find answers, even establish answers. They are able to actually use the ability of their minds to make discovery, and sometimes even rediscovery. The discovery doesn't necessarily mean that, it doesn't necessarily mean invention in the sense that it's something that someone has never done before. That's not the point. Is that even those things that have been established, for example, Newton's law of motion, these things are established. But do you realize that Newton's law of motion it didn't come down from heaven, like it didn't jump down from nowhere. Somebody sat down, thought about the process long enough to create that knowledge. Literally everything that we're teaching today is human creation. Now, don't get me wrong. When I say human creation, I don't mean that, for example, Newton created gravity. That's not what I mean. I don't mean it was because Newton said when we throw something, it always comes down. That's why gravity exists. No, gravity exists. But Newton gave word to how we describe it. That's what I'm talking about. That ability to describe what is already existing in the world is something that I believe education should actually equip people to do. It's not just about teaching people what other people have established, but actually helping them to see the process with which those people established them. And honestly, I feel that one of the reasons why this has been difficult to do is multifaceted, honestly, because these are things I've tried myself. So I know that it's nice as I'm saying it this way, but when it comes to actually practicalizing this, it's harder than it is. Honestly, it is. You could have just said, all you have to do is go to class, ask your students stuffs, and instead of just telling them, and maybe just instead of telling them there's something called plants and animals, just ask them what do they see around. But the truth is that when you are in the action of it, you discover that it's not that easy. What if you ask them question and they give you wrong answers? What are you going to do about that? Are you just going to assume that means they don't know it and I need to tell them? These are challenges that teaching this way actually you are going to have to face. But what we need to remember is that the people we called innovators, inventors, and all of these wonderful people whose minds were able to create knowledge that we now use in the world and we now teach in disciplines, one of the things that stood them out was the ability to follow through, the ability to explore something, even when they were not getting it again and again until they hit a mark. And the truth is that, why do we think that the people that we are teaching don't have that capacity? Why do we think that why do we have this compulsion to tell people things? Why do we think that if we create the right setting, they are not able to come up with solutions themselves? Let me read the second quote. I use this quote because I felt like they were just wonderful ways to describe what was in my mind. It says, no one can teach if by teaching we mean transmission of knowledge in any mechanical form from one person to the other. The most that can be done is that one person who is more knowledgeable than another can, by asking a series of questions, stimulate the other to think, and so cause him to learn from himself. What I'm advocating for in this is that teachers teach in a way that actually stimulates thinking, in a way that actually make people, I don't want to use the word force, because I don't mean force in terms of make something compulsory, no. I mean force in terms of stimulate, in a way that actually stimulates people to find out the capacity of their minds, put them in context that actually makes them try the things that they are able to do. The truth is that many of us actually don't know how much we are able to do until we are put into some certain context. And this kind of, and I believe that this is what education was supposed to do for people. We're supposed to actually bring us to a situation where we are able to sort of unleash our minds, unleash our capacity to think, so that after you have graduated, when you go into the real world and you face challenges, what you are using to deal with the challenges is not necessarily that they told you that water is H2O, but that you understand why it is and how the people who said it was that got to that conclusion. So you are able to use that same process of thinking to address new challenges. That's what I'm talking about. So the question then would then be how? How do we do this kind of teaching? And then before I talk about how, I would like to share a bit of an example of something that happened to me. So I can't remember the year I was teaching this. There was a particular course I used to teach. And then I decided to start using this methodology of teaching, of not just going into class and get in class and say, today we are going to be talking about igneous rocks or rock cycle. But to go into class and believe that my students, number one, they have capacity to think. Number two, they already have a bit of knowledge from the interaction from the world. And we can use that knowledge as basic truths to create higher forms of knowledge. So there was a particular class I was going to teach my students about igneous rocks. Okay. It had been a continuation of class, but this particular one I wanted to talk about. In that particular class, the topic we're supposed to cover was supposed to be about classification of igneous rocks. And there's a whole classification schema that we use, where there's all of this established knowledge of, there's this kind of, you classify igneous rocks based on their texture, on their color, and all of those things. And then under each of them, there's this, there's that, there's plutonic, there's this, and all of those things. But that day I decided that, okay, I was going to go to class and I was not going to tell them all of these things. So I remember it was 2020, because we were still in ASU strike and I was teaching from home. So we're teaching on Zoom like this. So I could not even do it the way I would have loved to do it if it was physical. My plan was to go to class. If it was a physical class, my plan was to go to class with igneous rocks in my hand, with different kind of igneous rocks in my hand, and ask them what they think about it. But because I couldn't do that because it was not a physical class, it was a virtual class, I decided to use images instead. So I downloaded a lot of images of different kind of igneous rocks, and I asked them, I showed about 8 to 10 of them. And I asked them for like half of the class. We had a discussion when I was asking them what do they think about all of these igneous rocks. And then people started talking like, oh, this one is light, this one is color, this one looks big, this one looks small. People started saying different things. Okay. And then I started guiding the conversation. And I asked them, okay, so if you see all of this and you need to group them, how would you group them? So one person said, oh, I can see that some of them are more darker color than the other. So maybe I could group them by color. Somebody was saying, oh, I can see that in the picture, some of the grains look bigger than the other. So maybe I could group them by size. So different people came up with different things. And then as they were speaking, I was also moderating and, sort of layering, revoicing what they were saying, layering them on top of each other, using what somebody said to explain what somebody else said and all of that. And at the end of the class, after they said all of that, I told them, okay, all of these things that you've said, because we were writing it down, like, okay, somebody said color, somebody said size, we're writing. So we said, okay, look at all of these things that we've said now. Is it possible that even those descriptors, you can then group them into like a smaller group? And then they started saying, oh, some of these things like color, size, they look as if they are physical components. And the funny thing is that by the time I was done with that class, my student came up with a classification scheme that was similar to what I would have taught them. the point I'm trying to make from that is just an example of the fact that now, imagine if I just come and told them the things, they would have had the same knowledge, but the truth is that they would not have had they would not have known they have the capacity to think about it. So let me proceed. The question then is how? How do we do this kind of knowledge? How do we do this kind of teaching? How do we sort of convert our class into this exploratory place where people, including ourselves and our students, are able to use our minds, use our creativity, try things out, make mistakes, just be that scientist, that researcher. Permit me to use scientist. I'm sure everybody doesn't teach science, but this works anywhere. Trust me. I've done this in a poetry class and I know it works everywhere. So these are some of the pillars that I think that are important, because the way everybody is going to do it will be different. But the pillars of how you get it done is like the most important thing. The first thing is making knowledge accessible. Now, making knowledge accessible is different from sharing knowledge. Just the same way content knowledge is different from pedagogy knowledge. Let me explain what I mean by that. So I'm sure that many of you probably have this experience. I don't know if you ever had, I knew that I had lecturers like that in my undergraduate. I don't know if you ever had a teacher in school or something like that. Maybe, I think you usually probably had more in universities. In my undergraduate, I had a couple of lecturers that I felt like when I'm in their class, I could tell that they know what they were saying, but they just were not able to communicate it in a way that I understood. Does anybody understand what I mean? I don't know if anyone understands. Yeah, I can see muting, giving me a thumbs up. Thank you. There are people like that you can tell that when this person is speaking, you know that this person knows it, but somehow they are not able to make that knowledge accessible to you. They don't have a way to, they don't know how to create a doorway for you into that knowledge. That's what I'm talking about here. It's the same difference between content knowledge and pedagogical knowledge anyway. It's the reason why teaching is a profession. Because everybody know, people know what you know, but doesn't mean they can teach it the way you can teach it. That's what makes it. That's what makes teaching a profession. Is that ability to make knowledge accessible, that ability to take something that would have felt very distant, very, very impractical, possibly, something that is just unreachable, and bringing it close enough that I can see that, oh, so this is what it is. That's what I'm talking about here. And it's a skill, honestly. It's a skill that can be grown. And it's done in different ways. It can be done as simple things as finding the right illustrations. You want to explain something to someone, the person is not getting it, and you find an illustration that can make sense to them. So they were like, oh, okay, so what's that big word that they call discombobulation just means that somebody fell down. Because you're able to make it into something that is accessible. It doesn't mean that you simplified it in the sense that they didn't think for themselves. It's that you make it such that it becomes relatable to them. This is quite important. This is like, I feel like this is like the first way to be able to make knowledge exploratory, because you can't explore something that you don't feel a connection to. I need you to ask yourself, there are many things that you probably have heard of in time past. What was unique? I know that there are many things that you found in the world, maybe things people have said beside you, but there are possibly times when somebody probably said something, or you heard something, or you were somewhere and you had this interest in it enough to want to explore it further or go and read about it. What makes the difference between those times is mostly because that knowledge that you had at that point was relatable to you. So the question, the work that a teacher needs to do to be able to create this kind of learning environment where students can become explorers, they are able to use the ability of their mind, is first of all to make knowledge accessible, make it something that they can relate with. And sometimes it's as simple as bringing it into their context. Because, there's a way many of these things can feel very distant. We're just calling all of these big words, all of these technical jargons, and we don't care about the fact that this thing doesn't make sense to these people. Instead of calling it one big word, to just use something that they can listen to, something that they can relate to. It might not be perfect, but the important thing is that it's accessible. That's first. Second is what I call empowering learners to access knowledge. So this is a Making oil accessible is like ensuring that the water is there. Empowering learners to access knowledge is ensuring that the people actually come to drink, because the water can be there and people don't come to drink it. So this is about how do you work with your learners in a way that even make them interested in exploring with you, because exploration is not easy. It's like being in the wild and trying to find something that you don't know. That's why a lot of people just prefer, tell me what I need to know. Don't tell me to be finding it myself. But finding it yourself makes you actually be able to understand how that knowledge was created. So how do you do that? How do you empower learners? 3 things that are found is, number one is allowing confusion. Again and again, I feel like education has been done in such a way that we make confusion automatically equate to stupidity. It's not true. Confusion is a valid part of education. In fact, you need a bit of confusion to keep you going, because confusion gives you questions. And without questions, you will not want to create answers. You know, there's in University of Ibadan, the Faculty of Science has this tagline that I love a lot. The tagline says, questions, not answers, create knowledge. And I agree. The people who become innovators are people who have questions. They are people who are burning questions, something that they wonder about. And the only reason why you wonder about is when everything doesn't feel, when you don't feel as if you get everything. If you get everything, why will you wonder about anything else? That's first. Second is acceptance. This is just an issue of setting. Setting in the sense that there's a way to do this kind of teaching where students feel free, learners feel free to actually express their mind without fear of judgment, without fear of being scorned or being mocked. There's just that way that you set your classroom, and it has to be intentional. You can't assume it. That's the truth. You cannot assume that everybody will just know that you can be free. No, you have to be intentional. Sometimes you have to voice it out. In fact, it's one of the things I say a lot in my class. My students know. I say it in my class again and again that in this class, nothing is stupid. As simple as that is, saying it again and again has made it such that my students feel free to speak, even sometimes when they are wrong. Third is the issue of ownership. What I mean by ownership in this situation is creating a setting such that you actually encourage people to do things their own way. I know that, especially when it comes to, for example, say math education, for example, everybody knows that 2 + 2 is 4, right? And 621 + 421 is 1042. Everybody knows that. But the question is, do you know that to add 621 and 421 together, different people will go about it in different ways? Do you realize that? In fact, if I had a lot of time, I would have had us do it, and I would have had us share, and you realize that by the time everybody starts sharing, the way different people went about it will be different. This is something I've tried. I've tried it in teachers training before. I had a training, a very specific training for 4 teachers in a particular school. A school invited me to train 4 of their sort of new teachers, and I gave them this assignment. It was simple. Had 600 and something plus 400 and something. And out of the 4, we found out that 4 of them went about it in 3 different ways. Someone added from the last, so 621 + 421. Somebody started adding from 1 + 1, then 2 + 2, then 6 + 4. That's the one that mathematics taught most of us. But some of them added it as 600 + 400, then 21 + 21. Somebody had added it as 620 + 420 before they added the remaining one. The point is that they all got to the same answer, but they didn't go the same way. But the point is, imagine if we all force everybody to say, you must be able to do it this way. You must be able to do it by saying 1 + 1 first, then 2 + 2 first. No. The point of ownership is knowing that people are unique and allowing them to go through their unique path, trusting that they're able to find their way to where they need to go, even if they go through their unique path. The third is verbally and intentionally encouraging student explanation. Encourage them to talk about what they are thinking about, because there's a way where talking about what you're thinking about actually helps you to clarify what you're thinking about. I don't know if this happens to you. This is part of the reason why I personally like to talk to my mentors. There are things that sometimes so many things are going on in my head that is when I have to sit down with my mentor or maybe share some things, I realize that I begin to find words to express it, words to, categorize it, because I need to explain it. I need to clarify it to somebody else. As I try to clarify it to someone else, it clarifies it in me too. Yeah, so I think I need to rush now. Oh, yes, I actually have to rush. Yeah, so teaching as education research. this time around, what I'm talking about here is you yourself positioning your work as a teacher as education research. The idea is, knowing that it's about knowing that you are not just a tool in education, you are a problem solver. You are the one right in face of the problem. So you have real data to work with, real data of what is happening in education. And when I say education, it actually means both in the large scale of things, think big in terms of SDG4 and all of that, and also in the small scale of things in terms of just your own classroom, just your own learner. Is about, positioning yourself as someone who is not just coming to give knowledge, but is coming to address the issues and make education better, make teaching and learning better. There's a way that teachers can keep doing their work without the consciousness that they are problem solvers in education, that they are not just people who come to implement education, but they are the ones who are at the front lines. Just the way entrepreneurs think about business, and they come into a place, the way we talk about entrepreneurs, they come into a place. Sorry that I'm talking about entrepreneurship. I already told you I'm an entrepreneur developer, so let me just use the example. Yeah, they come into a place, and what you are seeing as a challenge, they see solution. It's because they are aware. That's the kind of thing we're talking about here. And I would like to use a quote of Elinor Duckworth again. I'm sure by now you already know that she's such an inspiration to me. She says, a teacher is in a position to pursue questions about development of understanding that one could not pursue in any other way. I believe this with all of my heart. Teachers are supposed to be informing policy of education, not policy of education informing how teachers are supposed to work. Because you are the one right there. But because we've not positioned ourselves as people who are problem solvers, because we just position ourselves as people who are just there to teach what the lesson says we should teach, not people who are there to show if what the lesson says we should teach is working or not, to give advice that, oh, this is not working, maybe we should do it this way. Because we've not done that for a long time, teachers have been thought of as tools. There's just that sense of reduced professional dignity that the work of teaching has come to have. But I think we can change it. And it starts individually. It starts as, first of all, the way you are thinking about your work. And quickly, the pillars I'm going to talk about here is 4 pillars. I'm going to run through them very quickly. First is the mindset. I already started speaking about that. You need to position yourself with a mindset that you are not just a teacher in the sense of just implementing what people say education should be, but you yourself have the ability to channel education aright. You are like a driver of education, not just for your class, but even for the world, of sharing people, as in being able to have, because you have direct access to education, you're able to tell what is wrong with it, what is working, what is not working, what should be done, not just from a perspective of somebody that is just a flimsy, but from a serious perspective as that of a researcher who is able to give, data, statistics to show that, okay, so I tried this methodology in my class. I tried this learning method, say project-based learning, and this was what I found. I found that my students were growing this, but even though they were growing this, they were not growing this. So I think I need to add this to it. That's how I think that teachers need to be thinking. So the first of all is to understand that, have that mindset that you are a builder of mind, and that you yourself, you are an explorer in the profession. So this is not just about the teaching and learning as knowledge, it's as in the work of teaching and learning itself, but we're looking at it from a pilot view stance now, as someone who is inquiring into the profession of education, who is able to try things, test things, find things that work, that they can suggest to other people and people can use, who are able to create models of education that work. That's what we're talking about. Second is about the setting, what I call the pillars for being able to do this kind of thing, is the setting of trust and the setting of openness. What I mean by trust is the ability to trust your own self. When I mean trust your own self, I mean trust your ability to be able to do this. Trust that what you are calling your little classroom can produce knowledge that can take education generally higher a little bit. That what you are calling that little classroom with your students, and that little thing, that little idea of how to teach your students better, can actually become a breakthrough that becomes a way that teachers need to teach to get some certain solutions. I don't want us to underplay our work. That's the point. I don't want you to look down on the work you're doing. I don't want you to look down on wherever you are. Second is the issue of openness. Of course, if you're an explorer, you have to be open. You have to be open to what you find. You have to be open to the reality that sometimes you find things that are not exactly the way you were expecting them. For example, you might be doing something, trying a teaching methodology that you think is working well, but because you position yourself as a research, you actually look at the data and discover that, oh, I thought this thing was working, but it's not. It's the openness, that ability to work with whatever is working and not get too personal with this. Do you understand? It's not like a baby you are trying to keep, but it's like something you're actually trying to look at from an overview and make corrections if need be. The third thing is skills. There's a particular way there are skills that you can use to do this. First is active presence. What I mean by active presence is the ability to pay attention to your teaching work, not just to what you are teaching. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Let me say that again. So as I'm teaching this like this, let me use myself as an example. I can be paying attention to the fact that I'm talking about pillars. Or I can be, I can pay attention to the fact that I'm talking about pillars. And that is what I mean by paying attention to what you are teaching. But I also can be paying attention alongside to the process with which this teaching is going and seeing, are people understanding me? Maybe you really now understand the reason why I was asking questions about. I needed to see the chat. I needed to see if people are getting it. I'm paying attention, for example, to some of the faces I can see and seeing the way these people are looking at me. Does it look like they are getting it? Do you get? So what I'm talking about is that sense of active presence to have like an overview over your work, not just the content of the work, but the work as a whole. To be able to make assessments. So you are not just teaching mathematics in class. You are not just paying attention to the mathematics content you are teaching in class. You're also paying attention to the way you are teaching it, the responses you are getting from your student, if this is moving them forward or not. That's what I'm talking about. Beside that is already active listening. They are side by side. But the reason why I pull that out is to show you that the way to do this sometimes is just by paying attention. When I mean listening, I don't just mean listening to words, but listening to actions. Paying attention enough to see how are people reacting to the things I'm saying. Is this working? Does this style work? Sometimes you're in a class and everybody was bored at a point. Everybody was just looking at you like, what is this person saying? And we saw that everybody became active. Did you know what happened? Are you able to trace that this was exactly what happened, what I did that led to this difference? So maybe I need to do this better. I need to do this more because this is working. That's what I'm talking about. Is this sense of active listening, active presence in what you are doing, that you are able to see what is actually happening almost from a third person perspective. You are like an observer of your own work, as if somebody else is observing you. That's what I'm talking about. Then third thing is documentation. And I think teachers don't do this a lot. Documentation. We just teach and we go. But in that your class, somebody that was not getting something for 2 weeks, all of a sudden you did something and they got it. And you don't realize that is a breakthrough that you need to document down, because that's something that can help another teacher sometime later. That's something that if you begin to have those kind of documents together one way or the other, you're able to create this wonderful model of kind of education that works in certain setting that you have worked in. That's how to position yourself as people who are like innovators. I want you to think like an education entrepreneur, not just somebody who is there to just tell people things and go. No, you are a frontliner. You should act as one. Reflect on your teaching. In the last one semester, how was this semester different from the last semester? Do you even take inquiry from your student? Do you get information from your student and find out? Do you take end of course surveys, for example, to find out what is working or not? Do you know the things that you've done that is working and the ones that are not? Do you know when you are improving and when you are not? Can you even tell that, oh, I used to be like this, but I'm now like this and I can see this works better? Do you have that kind of conscious awareness of the progress that you are making in your work, such that you can use that progress to create models, not just for yourself, but for other people and for education space as a large career space? Then to talk about the tools, of course, this goes without the saying, is tools of inquiry, crouching yourself as somebody who is there to find things out. That's what we're talking about teaching as research. You're trying to find out about the profession. You're trying to find out about how education is done and how it can be done better. I already talk about reflection. And the third thing I really want to emphasize before I wrap up, which is the last one I'm going to be focusing on, is technology. Especially in the 21st century, where technology is a mediator of our lives, we cannot take away technology from all of these things. It makes our work faster. It makes our work better. It even creates models. For example, there was this semester where I started using tech-based games in my class. So there was this, I don't know how many of us know this game-based platform called Kahoot. So what I usually do is, okay, so before the class, when I know what we want to get at in the class, I would have, prepared all of my presentation and all of that, and then find out the goals of the class. So what are the things that at the end of class we should have been able to create together in terms of knowledge? And then I use that to design a Kahoot game before the class. So when we're done in the class, then we play the Kahoot game. And I realized that it worked a lot because my students were able to sort of practice what they've learned in a way that was fun for them. And it was wonderful. Another way that I use tech, for example, is some of these tech, I don't know how many of us have those kind of things in our school, learning management platforms where students can still reach out to you, you can share things with them. Things like even basic things like Google Form, are using it to get surveys from your students. Especially if you are teaching high school students, most of them have phones. You can give them anonymous survey and find out, is this working? Is this not working? What the other question you wanted to ask in class? Did you feel this way? Did you not feel that way? Basically, we can use all of these things to our disposal. Yeah, I think that my time is up and this is a comfortable place to stay. And I also acknowledge that this is just a beginning of, I believe that what I've done here today is just to give you things to think about. I don't plan to tell you everything. It's just to give you basic things to think about that you can then think about and create in ways that work for you. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to take questions now.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk. It was very, very inspiring. And I know that a lot of people resonated with what you were saying by watching the chat. It's amazing to watch the chat throughout the entire talk and just see everyone sharing their ideas. We have about 20 minutes for question and answer. We will see if anyone has questions in the chat. I also see Helen has her hand raised. So Helen, over to you for the first question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So thank you very much, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation. Sincerely, I was connecting with the pillars you were sharing, basically the aspect that has to talk about reflection, in aspect of the different methods we are introducing in our classes to ensure that the learners are actually developing their design, their thinking method in the classroom. So now, but I want to ask, there's this challenge that we have in the community, just like you spoke about in developing country. I'm currently in Lagos State, Nigeria, and I have this challenge most of the time. Talking about the technology, bringing it to the classroom, it happens that most of the time the parents might not want to allow the students to use this technology. So how can we handle with this challenge of the learners not being able to use their technology to take the teaching to the next level? And if you are the teacher, you have this mindset to do these things, how do we handle them? All right, so that's a big challenge I've been having with the issue of technology. So most of the time I have to go doing the local way of teaching them without technology and just keep. So I don't know if you can talk about how we can handle this challenge of technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so I think I'll just try to answer this question first, hoping that I'll answer the others one after the other. Honestly, what you raised is a very wonderful question because it's a whole discussion about the stakeholders of education. Because all of these things that we've spoken about, especially the part of the process itself, not the ones that just about your own career, they are subjected to other people's involvement. And because they're subject to other people's involvement, sometimes it's a little bit beyond your control, which is the reason why we also need to do advocacy. But to answer your question directly, I realized that, especially as educators, to get our work done with students, we need to pass through other people, say parents, education administrators, the government, and all of that. And we sometimes assume that they see things the way we are saying them. We assume that they understand that because you know that it's good for the student, you think that they automatically should just know. No, they themselves need to be educated, which is the reason why you need to do your work as a researcher and be able to show them real life data that this thing works. Why don't we do it this way? So the truth is that what you have asked is not something that's going to happen in a day. It's a long-term thing. It's a posture thing of knowing that you're not just going to be trying to teach your student. You need to also convince the other stakeholders, in your own case, their parents, of why this thing is important. The question of how you are going to do this is eventually in your hands. But the important thing is that your goal now is to realize that your education is not just to the student, but also to their parents. Does that make sense? You have to find ways to help them see what you are seeing, because the truth is that they are not seeing it. Up till now, I was speaking with someone recently who told me that up till now, our mom, I'm talking about someone who is over 20, who is doing masters right now. Our mom still feels like whenever she's holding a phone, she's just wasting her life. Our mom still feels like every time she sees her pressing phone, even if she's in a meeting like this, she just feels like, why are you always pressing phone? Or your other mates are working. That's a parent that have still not seen the value of this. So the point is, the question we should be asking really is, how do you get the stakeholders in your situation, and whatever other stakeholders you have a problem with, to see the value that you are trying to create with this, the value and how it concerns the student, how it eventually concerns them. And one of the ways, like I already shared with you, is, okay, let me use an example. I had a challenge with my student using education and adopting the tech I was trying to use to teach them when I first of all started out teaching in university. In fact, it was a very wonderful experience because it was shocking. I came into the university, I was so, I had all of this energy. I was coming to change everything and all of that, new young teacher and all of that. And I came in and, I anticipated that, everybody would warm up to my ideas. I wanted to, this was around 2019. Yes. So there was nothing like COVID yet. There was nothing like all of those things. But I came into the university, and I wanted to ensure that the way I taught was a combination of both hybrid. It was like hybrid model where I do both offline and online. All of my life, in the history of the department, we've always led physically. Nobody have ever tried to bother about Google Classroom. Many would not even know what that was. But because I knew that I was trying to prepare my students, I always say that my goal is to prepare my students as 21st century leaders. Part of 21st century leadership is understanding how the digital world works. So I wanted to use my education to also express them to that world so that they know beyond just Facebook, Instagram, and social media. And because I was dealing with young people and they were young adults, in fact. So I thought that, they were going to warm up to tech, all of them were already on Snapchat, on LinkedIn, and all of that. So I thought, it will not be a problem. To my shock, it was. It was shocking to me because again and again, I tried to get my students I would tell them, okay, submit your assignments via Google Classroom. People will still bring it written inside paper, trying to submit it. I'm like, no, why? And honestly, it took almost a session of literally doing motivational talk in class of why they need to use tech. Tech is the new word, education, something. Some of them will go abroad to school and in all those places to do it again and again for like almost like a whole session of convincing my students again and again and again. It was like a whole work of showing them the value of why this thing works, why this thing is better, why this works. What eventually drove up the point for me, and honestly, was COVID. By the time COVID came and learning management there became something that became ubiquitous, everyone started using it. That was when even some of my students started realizing that, oh, so this was why this woman used to shout, use this, use that, don't just come to class, I'm not going to collect paper assignment and all of that. The truth is that it's a long haul. I don't want you to give up. Even if you have been trying, you keep trying. But the point is, I don't want you to just be trying to tell them. I want you to be trying to show them the value. It's different. It's not the same thing. You can just be telling them, but it's different if you keep showing them the value. One day you'll be breakthrough if you don't give up. I hope that answers your question.
I think there are some follow-up comments from Helen in the chat about, can you see the chat?
I can see it. I can see that now.
Yeah, there's some follow-up comments in the chat about exposing the girl child to global opportunities online. And there's also a question from Oyagoga on what strategies helped you to cross leadership boundaries when you were a classroom teacher, bearing in mind the top-down school administration status quo in most school systems, and particularly in basic and secondary education.
I must first of all say that I love the questions I'm having. It shows people who are truly interested in doing something, because these are the questions we need to be asking. And honestly, I'm not going to try to answer all of your questions from a perspective of somebody who knows better than you. We're all in this together. This is the point I was also trying to make to Elaine. When I started out my teaching, I also had similar challenges, because a number of things that I was doing were not done before. Now, what I'm about to talk about, please take it as my own way of doing it. It might not work for you, but it was my own way because I knew how to find a solution. And that's the first thing I need to say. The truth is that everybody's going to need a unique solution. What will probably be common to it is the ability to think through, which is the reason why thinking is something that we must make the goal of education. But for me, what I decided to do, and you can see that my tone went a little bit lower. What I decided to do was influence change, start my change influencing in the places I could, and be patient to grow with it. The truth is that, especially when it comes to things that involve other people, stakeholders, people who probably have more, should I use power? I don't know if that's the right word, but I don't mean power in terms of maybe better than you or anything like that, but in terms of hierarchy and all of that and work authority. I found out that if you just try to change everything at once, you will not eventually get what you are looking for. You will scatter everything. So what I decided to do, what I saw and what I usually advise people, because I've had this kind of question people ask me in different ways at different times, is first of all, find your locus of control. Start with that and grow into it. This is what I mean. So when I was going to start teaching in university, because I was young, I'm not even sure if they've had anybody of my age in university in the last 30. You know the way universities are, you have people in their 50s, and especially in Nigeria. So I knew that the way I was going to go about things was going to be different. And everybody was going to be maybe paying attention to see what is she going to do and all of that. And I knew I could not teach the way some of my older colleagues used to teach. I can't come to class and be dictating notes. That's a waste of time. It's a waste of people's life. So what I did was, I was not going to go around saying you people should not do it this way and carry placard and say, oh, change. There's no need. Where can I control first? My own class. Right? My own class, I don't do this. My own class, I don't do that. With my students, if you have been told in other classes how you don't know anything and people put you down as a student, in my own class is a safe space. In my own class, I remind you that nothing you say is stupid. It might not be properly formed, but it's not stupid. The fact that you're able to think it is right. And you know what I found? I started doing all of these new things, brought Kahoot into my classroom. And I remember there was a particular day, I still remember it in my head, where we were having, I think one of the days we were having Kahoot game in my class. We're done with class and I was using Kahoot to sort of re-emphasize what we had learned in a way that was fun. It was so exciting that they were literally not necessarily shouting, but of course their voice was beyond average. And one of my older colleagues walked into the classroom. I was like, what's happening here? Then he saw me. He was like, what was I doing? Well, I just told him that no, we're just doing. I didn't try to explain this, I wasn't trying to necessarily change them. I was trying to show an example that they might be interested in changing to. Do you understand? For example, before classes, people don't necessarily teach you PowerPoint. They come, you write notes in class. But I felt, why would I be making people write notes in class when I can use that time to actually get them thinking? So I was using PowerPoint. I was doing all of that. I will go and teach in classes. I will go and teach in places where I can get electricity. I will send PowerPoint to my students ahead. And with time, I think some of these things, it was from a student that my other colleagues noticed. And later they started asking me questions. I remember one person asked me, can I teach her how I used to do this PowerPoint and all of that? I remember that there was a time that the former vice chancellor came to visit the department, and my HOD right beside me was saying to the vice chancellor was asking me, oh, that you're a teacher here and all of that. I was like, yes, sir, and all of that. I was like, how's that been going? It was my HOD that was answering on my behalf. I was saying, oh, she has been doing amazing. She has very interactive class. She even uses Kahoot. I was like, oh, you knew about that? So little by little, you gain influence enough for people to ask you questions, enough for people to actually take what you are saying seriously and not think of you as a threat that is coming to tell them that they don't know how they do what they are doing. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? So the point is not to come in with this aggressive, we want to make change. It will not work when you're dealing with people. Trust me, especially when you're dealing with people that are above you, it will not work. The idea is, I think of it as personal wisdom of setting example enough that inspire people that you can influentially lead them in certain direction, especially when you don't have the power in that sense, that authority to just make change that everybody has to adjust to. Does that answer your question? I hope it does.
Thank you so much for that response. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions in the chat or any other hands raised. So I'll just give a few seconds for anyone to gather any additional thoughts. So if there are no more questions, I have a final question for you. But I just want to make some quick announcements, and then I'll let you have the last word with my final question to you. So thank you everyone so much for joining this session. We were really so happy to have you here as a special guest speaking to our global schools advocates and teachers. And I want to ask you, is it okay if you share your contact information or your LinkedIn with some of our teachers?
Oh, why not? I think I'm just going to drop my LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is good because I actually share my thoughts with teachers on LinkedIn. I take LinkedIn as an advocacy space in a way. And you can check some of my previous posts. I used to put them in my feature. I think I just write things that I hope we get teachers thinking. Yeah. So first of all, let me drop my LinkedIn, and I also can share my email in case anyone would like to. This is the email that I usually use for that purpose. This is the one I'll probably see the fastest because I have a number of emails, but one of the ones I'll probably see the fastest. Yes.
Yeah. So while you're dropping your email in the chat, everyone, please take a look at that. I just have two quick announcements for the group. So on Monday, we will be having our conversation with our president, Jeffrey Sachs, all for you to congratulate you and your students on the work that you're doing. It will happen at 9 a.m. New York time. Please be aware that there is a time zone change tomorrow in New York. So if you think that you're usually 4 hours from New York, tomorrow you will be 5 hours from New York, depending on where you are in the world. So please take note of that. And the other thing is today we have launched opportunities to join the Global Schools team as project officers. So if you want to join in a similar role in the coordination, similar to Emmanuel and Kendra and Felix and Kenan's on this call as well, we would love to have you look at those positions on our website and join us in more of a strategic capacity also. So thank you for that. And lastly, I will turn it back over for my final question to you, Oluwatoyin. So if we have teachers that are going back to school tomorrow or Monday, depending on where they are in the world. So as they go into the week, what would be the main 2 to 3 things they should be thinking about to make immediate changes to start thinking about teaching as research? Because we heard so much from you, a wealth of information was amazing, but what would be those main suggestions? So I'll let you close out the session with that.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And I must say this has been a very wonderful conversation. First thing is to realize that you are a problem solver. If you forget anything today, please remember that you're a problem solver in education. You are not just a teacher that is implementing strategies. You yourself are able to give us direction of strategies. You're able to use your work to give indications of where education needs to be going. That's first. And I think if you think from that perspective, it changes the way you do everything. Imagine that what you are doing in your class will be used to direct what education will look like. How will you teach? That's the question. That's first. Second is to realize that your students have the capacity to think. They are not too small. They are not too young. Even if you look as if they don't talk, they may look as if they're having challenges. They are not stupid. They have interactions with the world that has given them knowledge. Even though it might not be technical, but those things are basic tools that you can use to help them construct higher knowledge by getting them to think. I think those would be like the 2 major things I would like to share. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you so much. We'll just take a quick picture before we log off. So as we always do, please turn on your cameras or off your cameras, depending on what you're comfortable with, and we'll all smile for a final picture. All right, I'll give 1 second for everyone to get ready with their beautiful faces. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And please hold, I have to go to the next screen, and 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you everyone so much. Feel free to follow up with our guest on LinkedIn, and we hope to see a lot of you on Monday.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, it's good to see you.